Thank you for listening to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, Flarey Tales. This series gives inspirational warriors with bladder conditions such as interstitial cystitis a chance to share their personal journey. This series is also intended to bring awareness and create conversation around the illness. This podcast is not intended to be a medical alternative for physician care, nor to treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease. So please consult with your physician for professional medical advice. This episode is brought to you by Premium Jane, an exceptional manufacturer of high-quality CBD products packed with natural goodness. Relax, refresh, and revive with 20% off. Click the link in the description and enter BBP at checkout. Today, I invite the founder and blogger of Girl Compressed, Mel Franz, to share her personal story and her advocacy efforts for chronic illness warriors. So, Mel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to learn about your blog and your companion dog and all the wonderful things that you are up to. But before we get into all of that good stuff, I want to know about you a little bit and what you've been going through health-wise over the last few years. So if you can kind of tell our audience a little bit about your personal story with chronic illnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been quite the journey, as it is for most people with chronic illness. I started this journey probably like 3 years ago. I started having anaphylactic episodes randomly and kind of related to no specific trigger. And from there, things went downhill very quickly. I developed POTS as a result of, my autonomic nervous system just not working quite right. That diagnosis journey took about a year. And in that year, my gallbladder failed. So I had to have surgery. And then it was just, riding a wave of learning to live with POTS and very severe allergy issues that are triggered by anything and everything.
Yeah.
So
that sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. I'm on year 3. I've been hospitalized 10 times, ICU 4 times, and I just got done with my 7th surgery. So hopefully that's the last one for a while. Yeah, so things, I got diagnosed with POTS. Things started to look up. I started managing my condition a little bit more, and I actually was able to go back to school. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, which was quite a nice change considering, during that time I had been living abroad and then I had to move home very abruptly. And so I had finally gotten back to school. And then one day I was sitting in class, and I've always had bladder anxiety. But I was like, oh my God, I am leaking pee.
Oh no.
And I'm
no,
like
that's
sitting,
terrible.
I'm sitting in this lecture and I'm like, okay, this is anxiety. Just sit through it. And all of a sudden I was like, no, I gotta go. And so I left, I went to the bathroom, totally expecting my mind's playing tricks on me. This isn't happening.
Right.
And lo and behold, no, this is in fact happening and it's real. And so it was like just a few drops, noticeable to me, but not like on my pants, not complete overflow. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to my lecture. I'm going to sit back down. It's going to be okay. And then like maybe 5 minutes went by and I was like, all right, I'm out of here. I got to go. Something is really wrong. And of course, by the time I got to the urgent care that I was going to, I was completely soaked. So that was my journey into bladder issues. It went from 0 to 100 so fast.
Yeah, that's crazy that you didn't really have symptoms of that before or even any sort of indication. of incontinence. So that's kind of crazy that it decided to happen, all at once right then and there. But I guess luckily you were, sitting down and
Yeah.
you weren't, giving a presentation or something, I guess I always try to look at the positives
No, I'm
of
with
these
you. Yeah.
awful situations. So you mentioned always having bladder anxiety. So I've never really heard someone say that before. So can you kind of explain what that means?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually have diagnosed OCD. And for me, that manifests in a lot of intrusive thoughts. I don't have a lot of outward compulsions, but I have a lot of mental compulsions. And one of those is feeling like I need to have my bladder completely empty all the time, which of course is impossible because our kidneys are always working.
Right.
But as a child, I had a lot of accidents. And now, of course, as I'm going through the process of learning about, what is related and what's not, unfortunately, I think I probably had autonomic dysfunction my entire life. And those accidents were likely a result of this uncontrollable dysfunction. But that threw me into this anxiety spiral because everybody around me was like, it's your problem. Like, go deal with it by yourself.
Gosh. Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I feel like once you throw bladder into the mix of things as, symptoms, nobody wants to hear about it. Everyone gets kind of weird and grossed out, and it can be a little
It's a really awkward topic.
It is.
I mean,
it is.
It's really hard to find people who are willing to talk about it with you. And it's usually the people that have it that come to me and are like, can I talk to you about this? Because I can't find anybody else to talk to. And I'm like, yes, I would also like somebody to talk to about it.
Right. I saw a huge need for that after I got diagnosed with IC, and just not feeling comfortable talking about it myself. And I've always been a very private person. So I'm not, over here telling people how I feel. I don't even like talking about my period.
Yeah.
So to get diagnosed with this and then start a podcast was a little strange, but
I really appreciate
but it's been really
it though.
Good.
I mean, it's such a huge step forward. I feel like it's something that is just really missing, even in the chronic illness community. I mean, and the more you talk about it, the more people you find, but it's just incredible because until you start taking that leap of talking about it, like, you just have no idea how many other people are out there.
Right. Yeah. It definitely has helped me to feel a sense of community and not feel so alone, because I don't know that many people that have, well, I guess now I know a lot of people that have bladder issues, but before I didn't.
Yeah.
So it was really great because, these chronic illnesses affect us in so many different ways. And so, for myself, I felt very depressed. I was questioning, why am I even here? Why me? Like, what did I do?
Yeah.
I believe in karma. I was trying to think of like all the things that maybe I did wrong. So, it's great to have, that sense of community. So kind of going off that, I would love to know how having chronic illness and having these weird symptoms that, you're not always sure what's going on with your body, how has that affected you, mentally and kind of in life in general? So your relationships and your career, you said you went back to school. So kind of how has this affected you positively and negatively?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. Obviously, it's something that you have to learn how to deal with over time. And I would say, like, the first year of my chronic illness experience, I was in survival mode 100% of the time because I was having so many episodes of throat swelling that it was just a constant fear, a constant danger.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So during that time, I let a ton of relationships fall. I just wasn't there for anybody. And during that time, I had just recently moved to Ireland. So it was quite an intense time for me. in general, but adding that fear and chronic illness on top of that was just kind of insanity. And then once I moved back home and I kind of learned how to live with some of this, I started to open back up, and I figured out my place in Minnesota again. And I did go back to school. And then because of the incontinence, I ended up being hospitalized on a neural floor because, of course, that's not something that's supposed to be happening. And because I was having all of these other symptoms that they can't explain, they were very concerned about MS. And, at one point they thought I had a stroke. It was,
oh my gosh,
which of course I didn't, and I don't, which is amazing, but it really was an intense time. And of course that was the second time I had been hospitalized. So at that point I dropped out of school again, but it took,
it's a shame.
Yeah, but I really am a big believer in like whatever is supposed to happen will, even if it's not
right.
what you like or what you want.
Exactly.
Because at that point, when I dropped out for the second time, that's when I started my blog, because I was like, I have to do something with all of this time. I have so much fear. I have so much time on my hands. I have to do something productive. And so I started my blog, but it wasn't until I want to say like 4 or 5 months. You know what? It was probably longer than that. It was probably 8 months to get a urologist that was actually going to listen to me about, because of course they were like, oh, well, go to pelvic therapy. And I failed it right away. Like I went to 2 sessions and my therapist quit on me because she was like, this isn't consistent with anything I've ever seen before. I don't know how to help you. Like, go away, basically. And I was like, okay, thanks.
That's not very reassuring.
No, it wasn't. And I was so scared because I was like, what is going wrong in my brain? Because that's the only consistent thing that everybody was telling me is like, this is a problem with your brain. And I'm like, that's not helpful. Like, this is not reassuring to me that I am okay.
Yeah. The last thing you want to be told is that it's all in your head. It's all your psyche.
Right.
That's not a valid answer for me. And that you don't want to people shouldn't make you feel worse by telling you it's all mentally connected. And maybe some of it is, but that's not a good answer in my opinion.
Well, and I'm always very upfront with my doctors when I feel that like my OCD or anxiety or fear is driving a little bit too much. I try to be as upfront about that as possible because it removes some of that space for them to make a judgment call about that, because it's my head. I can tell you what's happening in it, so I might as well be upfront.
Exactly.
I also go through extensive OCD treatment and therapy in general just to deal with chronic illness and everything that's happened in the last few years. But once I found a urologist that would actually listen to me, I of course failed all the medication. I tried PTNS. I don't know if you know what that is.
No. I mean, maybe, but not off the top of my head.
So it's basically like nerve stimulation through your foot to try to get your nerves to react properly to stop the incontinence.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the thing with PTNS is that it can be really helpful, but you have to go for 12 weeks straight, and then you have to do it month to month for eternity.
Wow. Oh yeah. Like that's super convenient.
Right. Which is what I told them. I was like, I plan to go to grad school. I would like to move away from Minnesota. Like I have all of these hopes and aspirations, and none of this involves you sticking an acupuncture needle in my foot and stimulating my bladder. So basically at that point, because I had some success with the PTNS, they ended up putting a neurostimulator in my back that connects to my sacral nerve, which helps me control my bladder.
Oh, wow.
So I've had like 95% success, but I still have to time void. I still have to, do all the classic things that they make you do in order to keep that success rate high. But it wasn't until I got my neurostimulator that I really felt comfortable with like, okay, I'm going to take control of my life again. Because at that point, I felt like my POTS was under control. I had gotten my OCD back under control. Everything was kind of like, okay, enough for me to like really put myself out there and be like, okay, I want to start dating again. I want to live and be my age.
Right.
Which is just a crazy concept, but yeah, so I started that journey, but it took a long time to get there, and it's been an interesting one, to be sure.
For a lot of us who are younger, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm in my late 20s, and it feels like I'm 28 going on 80 some days, and it's very frustrating because I the thing I always say is I just want my life back. I want the me that I used to know. I want that person back. But you kind of go through and you reevaluate all the things that these illnesses have brought to you in life. And I don't know, if I have to live with it, then I just know that I'm so much better for it because I've pushed myself to do so many things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And maybe I'm not as active, or maybe I'm not going out as much, but I'm doing more advocacy. And I think it's kind of similar to your story. And so, starting this blog, you quit school because you had to, because of your illnesses, but now you've created something even more meaningful that, you can, school is great, but now you have this whole channel that you can put out information and help other people. And I just think that's so much more rewarding than schooling, of course, both things are great if you can do both. So I'm very interested in your blog. I loved looking at it. I like the content you have on there. So for our listeners who haven't seen your blog, where can they find it, and what's the main types of content that you have out there?
Sure. So girlcompressed.com. So some of it is my personal journey because I think it's really hard to put out content without saying like, this is my experience with this content. That being said, my entire goal with my blog was to save people the pain that I went through in the learning process of like, it's not okay for doctors to gaslight you, but know that that's a normal experience. Like, that's not like, you're not going through this alone, and it's not something that you're doing or could be doing better. It's something that happens, unfortunately, and we can all work against it. Things as simple as like, what helps with my POTS symptoms? How do I make those better on a day-to-day basis? I found a lot of great content in my service dog Crush. People are really interested to learn about him.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was very intrigued by, just the thought of having a companion. It didn't cross my mind because, and I don't think it crossed a lot of our minds because we're still able-bodied people. Maybe we're not in a wheelchair. We have invisible illnesses, so to speak. So the thought of having a companion animal never really crossed my mind originally. So, I'm very interested to kind of hear about Crush and how you got into the whole program.
Yeah, sure. So Crush is the culmination of like a lot of bad days where I would just end up getting stuck somewhere for literal hours because every time I stand up, my blood pressure drops, my heart rate skyrockets, and I just immediately started to pass out. And so I would like stand up, sit down, wait 20 minutes, stand up, sit down, wait 20 minutes. And I would get stuck on campus for hours. And there's like ways that I would mitigate that and try to help myself. But in reality, like, it just really wasn't working. And because of how severe my POTS was at one point, I had to learn how to walk again because I have such a hard time placing myself in space that every step I would take is quite literally like a leap of faith because I have no idea where the ground is. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, as I was going through the process of learning to walk, I was like learning to use a walker, and you know, that was great because I started to get freedom back. But the reality is, like, nobody wanted me going out anywhere alone because I was passing out and like not okay. So I was like, I want a service dog. I want to, like, I saw people with them that they could task to help your blood pressure or get you things when you're on the ground. Like, you know, even some dogs know how to like do crowd control, essentially. Like, they'll just start orbiting you so that people can't come near you if you pass out or something. Like, there's a lot of things that I saw where I was like, okay, I could use this to my benefit. Mm-hmm. And like then that would get me away from using a walker and never being able to go out alone.
Yeah. It makes you feel more secure, and that fear of, you know, passing out because you pass out. And I'm somebody that's traditionally had low blood pressure my whole life. So I also have it's called vasovagal response. Basically, like, my body goes into flight, like, very quickly, like way quicker than the normal person. So I totally feel you there in that fear of, oh my gosh, am I going to pass out? You know, can I even get up? Am I dizzy? Like, how am I going to be able to do this? So having this service dog that's amazing, because now you feel like, okay, I have something that's going to not only watch over me if I do pass out, but guide me, you know, when I'm feeling dizzy, or just keep me, you know, protected from other people if in case I am, you know, unconscious. So I love that. I think that's really amazing that you came, you know, across having one and you decided to just take the plunge, because I would be probably a little nervous myself, but I love animals. So
yeah. So I would say from the time that I originally applied to the time that I got him, it was less than a year, which is kind of incredible to me because, you know, just to apply, you know, you send in your application and then you have to have your medical doctor sign off. You have to have a mental health professional sign off. And then you have to have 2 references, like friends or people outside of your initial home. Say like, this is something that would be applicable to your life and your lifestyle, because that's something that I learned from people along the way is like, it's great if a dog can help you, but the reality is if you're not in a place to exercise the dog day to day, then it doesn't necessarily help you, because, you know, their needs need to be met just as much as yours do. And if you can't meet their needs, they're not going to be able to help you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great point.
So I went through this huge learning process. I got an interview into the program. I got accepted. And then from there, it was several months of just waiting to be matched. And Can Do Canine specifically works out of Minnesota, but they also work with Wisconsin. And they're a nonprofit organization that all they do is place service dogs with people with disabilities for free. which is incredible because
yeah, that's amazing.
Service dogs, well-trained service dogs, can be valued at like $20,000 to $30,000, which is originally, like, when I looked into it, I was like, I'm gonna have to self-train. I'm gonna, like, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. I am not patient enough for that. And so when I found them, I was like dumbfounded at the fact that this was even a thing. Like, they changed so many lives. So, you know, subtle plug to them. If you go to their website, I think it's kenducanines.org, donate, because what they do is absolutely incredible, and they work with people every single day.
I mean, that is amazing. No cost. And now you have Crush there to help you and just to keep you safe and feel secure. So that's really amazing. On your blog, I know you mentioned that you do post about him. So what kind of content do you share, you know, in regards to either the program or your experience with him? Or is it, you know, are you sharing kind of a combination of both the program and Crush himself?
Yeah, so the program itself is not super interactive until you get matched with your dog. And then once you get matched, you obviously meet with them, which is honestly one of my favorite memories, is like just sitting there waiting. Like, I had already met Crush, and they were like, "This isn't your dog." And I was like, "Oh my God, I hope that it's my dog. I love him so much." And I came back and I was waiting, and I met him, and I was just like, oh, I fell in love instantly. That's just a side note. But once you get matched, you work with them for 2 weeks while they're still in the facility. And then after 2 weeks, they move home because they've already learned all of your tasks before they move in with you.
Oh, and wow. So, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's really an incredible process because most of the work that I had to do was learning how to handle him. Mm-hmm. And part of that too is, like you were saying earlier, you know, I have an invisible illness, and something that they really stressed to me during the process of applying is like, you're kind of outing yourself, because everywhere you go, you're going to get a lot of looks, and you're going to get a lot of feedback, whether that be positive or negative. But, you know, everybody is going to want to tell you about their dogs. Everybody is going to want to, you know, pet Crush. You're going to have to tell people no all the time. You're always going to have an eye looking out for his safety as well as your own. You know, it's not as simple as like, well, I'm going to take my dog to PetSmart. It's like, you know,
yeah, there's you're taking him everywhere. He's going everywhere with you, and you, it's hard when you're younger, and, you know, like we said, it's an invisible illness. So some people may not react positively to that. So, you know, you have to be kind of ready for all of that. You know, you're, like you said, you're kind of putting a target on yourself, which is unfortunate, but you need it. And I've always said, who cares what people think? But, you know, that can also kind of affect your mental state as well. So
I think it's one of those things where you adapt to it. But there are definitely, like, there was one day just a few weeks ago, actually, where I was waiting in line at the pharmacy, and I was with Crush, and I was actually having like a really bad day. So I was holding on to him. He has a hard handle harness. That's how he helps me get around. Mm-hmm. And this lady behind me said out loud in front of everybody, well, there's clearly nothing wrong with her, so it's an emotional support animal.
Oh,
and
are you kidding me?
I have so many reactions to this because, like, I always try to extend people compassion. You know, I think you have to be in a really bad place in your own life to be openly degrading others. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely nothing wrong with needing an emotional support animal, but I have a reaction to that because emotional support animals should never be in public spaces. because they actually pose a threat to service animals because they have no need to be trained.
Right. Yeah.
So I like all of this is running through my head, and I just turned around, looked her dead in the eye, acknowledged that she said what she said, and just like moved on with my life, because I was like, I'm going to be wasting my time if I say anything to this woman. But it happens. Like, it happens all the time. But I feel very lucky because, you know, those comments are few and far between. Most people really do just want to like say, oh my God, he's so amazing. He's so beautiful. Like, you're so lucky to have him, which is great. And I, you know, it really does brighten my day too, but it is also hard on bad days because it's like, okay, everybody can leave me alone now. Like,
like,
I don't want to deal with you
for the attention. I need him and I want you to leave me alone. Like,
yeah, exactly. So that being said, going back to your original question, as far as what I blog about when it comes to crush, I did blog the process. And so you can always go back and find those. Everything is archived and tagged. So if you go on my website, there's like a tag cloud. And if you click on crush or service dog, all of those articles will come up. But I also, you know, kind of went through like, okay, how has it been like a month having him? What's changed? What did I learn? Kind of what the process is. When I figured out what gear works for me, what I pack in my bag for crush, you know, those kind of things, because those are harder to find on the internet, you know, like they're things where like you can find trainers or like, I train dogs for a living and this is what I bring with me to train dogs. But it's really hard to be like, you know, for chronic illness, especially like for me, I have, you know, 10 medications that I have all the time. I have EpiPens, and then I have all of Crush's stuff, and then I just have like normal people things. And learning how to keep all of that in one bag in a concise and like organized fashion is harder than you would think.
No, you have a lot of, you know, different types of content and different tips and things like that. So there's a lot out here, and I love it because it's a great space for someone that's dealing with, you know, unknown symptoms, or maybe they know what illness they have or what disease they have, but some of these things are great. It's just, it's very relatable. And I like that you have blogged about your experience with Crush, because somebody that is considering getting a service dog, you know, this could be really helpful to them just versus what they are Googling. I think this is just a really great platform, and it's set up so nicely too. I really like it. Put a lot of effort into it. So, I think it's just amazing what you're doing. And I think it's really important that we all talk about kind of what our symptoms are, because I think, you know, everybody experiences things differently, but it can be really beneficial. So for you, how does it feel to openly discuss your symptoms and your, you know, incontinence and things that are kind of private? How does it feel to just be open about all of that now?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I, you know, where I am now as opposed to 3 years ago, I would have never said anything about it. I would have never told anybody. I probably would have suffered with it in private until it like became unbearable because I just didn't want to bring it up. Now, and again, like, I think that our journey brings us to places where we need to be. You know, I don't care at this point talking about it. I think it's one of those things where I know that even if someone isn't willing to talk about it for themselves, if they hear other people talking about it, it's going to help them, because it's creating a community where people know that they're not alone, because they're not. Like, this is a common problem. And that's what was so crazy for me going to the urologist and like going through pelvic floor therapy. I was saying, like, I know that other people go through this, like, but the question that I would always get asked is, have you ever been pregnant? Have you given birth?
I hate
and
that
I was
question.
No,
I hate it.
No, I haven't. Like, I have no idea why this is happening to me. But then it's interesting because I remember very vividly that one day I got very upset with them because I was like, no, I don't know why this is happening. Like, it would be justifiable if I had given birth, if I peed myself sometimes, but I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And they stopped and they were like, there are options even in that scenario. People don't have to go through that.
Yeah.
And I stopped and I was like, what? Like, I feel like as women, we just like, and of course that is a natural part of life. Like, you give birth and things loosen up. But it was crazy because I had them elaborate more, and they were like, well, there's all these exercises you can go, like PT, like pelvic floor therapy is extremely helpful in those scenarios. And I was like, I mean, I haven't given birth. I don't know, like, if that's given to people as an option, but that was insane to me because I feel like we just widely accept some of these things as normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, they don't have to be. But again, like you said, like, we're just programmed to be like, well, I don't want to bother anybody, so I'm just not going to do anything about it and like suffer alone.
Yeah.
And that's so sad.
It really is. Because, yeah, I had the same question asked to me. And even when I do tell people about having IC and I get a lot of weird symptoms, sometimes my bladder leaks. I get a lot of burning. It's just like uncomfortable to sit down sometimes.
Yeah.
It feels like a UTI some days. Other days my tailbone hurts. I mean, it's all over the place. So when I was explaining this to somebody that I didn't really know, but they were kind of interested in health and wellness and nutrition, the girl asked me, well, how many kids have you had? And I'm just like looking at her like, this is hilarious because I'm 5 feet tall and I'm 90 pounds. So it doesn't really look like I've popped out any children anyway. And I'm like, how many? That's quite a question. I've had none. And she was just very shocked. She's like, wait, you mean like you're sneezing and you're like peeing a little bit and you've never had kids? I'm like, nope, never. And I don't plan on it. But, I don't know why this is happening to me, and I don't know why it's happening now. It could be hormonal. I mean, who knows? And I haven't gotten a clear answer of the root cause of it. But yeah, and then I had a doctor ask me that as well, a gynecologist. And I'm like, I think you might know if I've had kids. Right. You're examining me. Like, that's a little scary. So.
It's just crazy to me. Like, the entire process of going to urology is such a weird experience. Like, by far I've gone to a lot of specialties, right? Like, throughout my entire chronic illness journey, I've seen at least 200 doctors. But urology is always like, people tiptoe more than any other specialty that I've ever seen. And it's crazy to me that, like, I try to be as upfront about everything that I'm experiencing as possible. And I sat down with this male fellow, and he's like, well, are you dating? Are you sexually active? And at the time I was like, no. And he was like, why? And I was like, 'cause I'm peeing myself, sir. Like, why do you think? Like, oh my gosh. What a question to ask. Like, I mean, and of course they have to, right? But it's just so, it's ridiculous because it's like, can you just stop for a second and put yourself in my shoes and then be like, oh yeah, I really want to date right now. And I have to explain to someone else why I'm peeing myself.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's it's a cold experience, I guess, because I've been to a few different specialty doctors and, nobody likes going to the gynecologist, but I still feel like that's a more pleasant experience than going to a urologist, even though I'm not, necessarily being like violated in the same way or examined in the same way, but it's just the conversations. And what I have found is that urologists, although they're educated in both urinary tract systems for men and women, they tend to deal with more male urinary issues like prostate cancer. So they're more programmed to assess that and deal with that. And so that's where the recommendation came to me to find a urogynecologist. And then I was like, whoa, what is that? Like, never heard of that. But they do specialize in, a lot of it is like prolapse and like, oh, you've had a couple kids and that kind of stuff. But they do, they are dealing with some of this, these issues in some of us that are younger, like having incontinence in your 20s and 30s and not having kids and, interstitial cystitis and, pelvic floor dysfunction. So, that's where I think the difference is. But again, these are things that you wouldn't know if you just Googled it. No one's going to sit there and tell you, okay, urologist is going to likely be more programmed to deal with a male urinary tract system than a female's. Not to say that they're not educated in it. It's just their protocol is a little bit different. So it's frustrating. Yeah, definitely. It's very frustrating.
The surgeon that actually placed my neurostimulator was a urogyn. And throughout my entire journey, that is where I ended. But it's just crazy to me because even for a urogyn, I asked them, because all of the research that I read prior to getting my stimulator placed basically said that you can't have children afterwards because of the wire and the connection. But I asked them and they were like, we don't know. So
Great.
If you get pregnant, tell us and we'll find out together. And I was like, wow, it's
great. Makes me feel great. Thank you.
Amazing. So reassured. But I think it goes to show like we're still learning as time goes on. Like, I get that the neurostimulator, is kind of a new technology as far as like innovation goes, but it's crazy to me because I think most things are so programmed to males that, you kind of have to learn as you go with the female body because we're using something that's made for males.
Which is just crazy that we're not there yet. But yeah, that's, those are things that we definitely have to keep in mind. Unfortunately, that we have to keep in mind, think about, but it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we wrap up, I always like to ask everybody that's on the show if they have, a good inspiration that they would like to pass on that's, something to live by, or any recommendations or just positive thoughts that you would like to end our episode on.
I think the thing that has changed my life the most throughout this entire journey is finding gratitude. I now write down 5 things that I'm grateful for every morning and every night. And it has completely changed my life because I'm more programmed towards positivity, and I don't focus so much on the negative because I think it's easy, especially in chronic illness, to feel like you're just getting punched in the stomach constantly.
Yeah.
Like every news is almost always bad news. Like they either don't know, or your tests are normal, but you're suffering, or your tests are really bad. Like I think it's really, really hard to find a balance. And when I started focusing on like, okay, I can do this today and I can do this for myself today. And like, it just completely changed my mindset. That and compassion and empathy, which I think we could all use a little bit more of in day-to-day life and just in general. But, you know, I really do believe that everything happens for a reason, and, you know, whether you like it or not, you'll probably end up where you're supposed to be.
I like that. I'm definitely figuring that out myself, especially in the last year. So gratitude is definitely a common theme amongst many of the people that I have on the show. I think we're all figuring out how to be grateful for where we're at. So I really like that. And I really appreciate your time going into detail about your blog and your personal journey. And
thank you for
your
having
service
me.
dog crush, who's adorable. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It was great getting to know you and just hearing all that you've been through. I know it's not easy to open up, but I appreciate it. And thank you for your time. And I also want to thank our audience for taking the time to listen to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, Flarey Tales. Make sure to subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or leave a rating or review on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And stay tuned right here for the next episode on the Bladder Battle Podcast.